A plain language guide to California Form FL-144, the form spouses sign together to waive the final declaration of disclosure after their preliminary disclosures have already been exchanged. What is Form FL-144? Form FL-144, titled Stipulation and Waiver of Final Declaration of Disclosure, is the California Judicial Council form that tells the court two things: that you and your spouse or domestic partner already exchanged your preliminary first declaration of disclosure, that you both agree not to exchange a final declaration of disclosure with each other. A stipulation is a formal agreement between the parties in a case. FL-144 is that agreement in writing, signed by both spouses and filed with the court in place of a final Form FL-141. When FL-144 is used in your case, California divorce and legal separation cases generally involve 2 rounds of financial disclosure, a preliminary declaration of disclosure, and a final declaration of disclosure exchanged later in the case, closer to judgment. FL-144 comes into play at that second point. Instead of preparing and serving a full final declaration of disclosure, both spouses sign FL-144 to confirm they are relying on the preliminary disclosure already exchanged and do not need to repeat the process. This form is not available at the start of a case. You cannot waive the preliminary declaration of disclosure, and both parties must have already properly completed and served it before a waiver of the final round is an option. What FL-144 does not waive? It is worth being precise about what this form covers, because the name can be misread. It does not waive the preliminary declaration of disclosure. That step is still mandatory in every case. It does not waive your duty to disclose material financial changes. Signing FL-144 includes a declaration under penalty of perjury that you have kept each other informed of any significant changes since the preliminary disclosure. It does not replace Form FL-141 for the preliminary round. You still file an FL-141 confirming service of your preliminary disclosure. FL-144 only stands in for the final round. Think of FL-144 as narrowly targeted. Before you start. Before you and your spouse sign FL-144, you'll typically both be able to confirm your preliminary declaration of disclosure was properly completed and served, generally including Form FL-140, Form FL-142, and Form FL-150. Proof of that service was filed with the court using Form FL-141. Neither of you has undisclosed material changes to your income, assets, or debts since that preliminary disclosure. Preliminary declaration of disclosure completed and served by both spouses. FL-141 already filed confirming that service. No unshared material financial changes since the preliminary disclosure. Filling out FL-144 section by section. Case information. Enter your name, your spouse's or domestic partner's name, and your case number exactly as they appear on your petition, response, and other filed documents. As with any court form, mismatched names or case numbers can cause processing delays. The stipulation language. The body of FL-144 states that you and your spouse exchanged the preliminary declaration of disclosure and agree not to exchange a final declaration of disclosure. Read this language carefully with your spouse before either of you signs. Both of you are agreeing to the same statement. Declaration under penalty of perjury. FL-144 includes a sworn statement that each spouse has complied with the preliminary disclosure requirements, has disclosed all material financial information, and is not concealing assets or debts. This is not a formality. Signing it is a legal declaration with the same weight as testimony in court. Both signatures. Both spouses or domestic partners must sign FL-144. A form signed by only one party is not a valid stipulation and will not be accepted as a waiver of the final declaration of disclosure. If you and your spouse are working through this form separately, for example while represented by different counsel or while communicating through a mediator, build in time for both signatures to actually make it onto the same document before you plan to file. Do not submit a form with only your own own signature and expect the court to treat it as pending. An incomplete FL-144 is not a valid stipulation. Filing FL-144 with the court. Once both spouses have signed, FL-144 is filed with the court, generally alongside or near the point where your case is moving toward judgment. As with FL-141, check your county superior court self-help center or clerk's office for the exact number of copies and filing method, in person, by mail, or e-filing, your court expects. Confirm both spouses have signed before filing. File with the court as part of your judgment package or as directed by your court. Keep a copy for your own records. Why couples choose to waive the final disclosure. Couples who have reached a full agreement on how to divide property and resolve support, and whose financial situations have not meaningfully changed since the preliminary disclosure, sometimes use FL-144 to avoid duplicating paperwork they have effectively already exchanged. This is more common in uncontested cases or cases resolved by agreement, where both spouses are confident nothing material has shifted since the preliminary round. It is less appropriate when a case has dragged on for a long time, when either spouse's finances have changed significantly, or when either spouse has any doubt about the completeness of what was already shared. Common mistakes to avoid. Signing FL-144 before the preliminary declaration of disclosure has actually been completed and served. Filing FL-144 with only one spouse's signature. Waiving the final disclosure despite a material change in income, assets, or debts that was never shared. Confusing FL-144 with FL-141, which confirms service rather than waiving it, assuming FL-144 also covers or waives the preliminary disclosure requirement, leaving the case number or party names inconsistent with other filed forms. If keeping track of all of this by hand feels like a lot, that is exactly what Virdix is built for. The wizard at Virdix.co walks you through these same questions in plain language and prepares your FL-144 for you. Virdix is a document preparation service, not a law firm, so this is not legal advice, but it can help make sure your paperwork is complete and consistent from the start.